like your story in general is a lot of like firsts, right? Like getting a first client, starting a first business, raising for the first time, hiring the first time, all of that stuff. Or as a first time immigrant founder, how do you like close your first sale?
I remember during like our college time, we used to watch US Shark Tank on like the back seat of our classrooms, and that's kind of where it all started. We started out during college, and then in 2016 we moved the company to Bangalore, and then we spent the next 3-4 years in Bangalore before moving to the US because it was complete chaos at that time. Right, every day was a war between surviving or shutting down. Right, you're constantly on an adrenaline surge, right, and you're doing whatever it takes, and every day you wake up thinking that okay, is this the last day, right? And then you just survive to have one more day. With how the journey really started with taking the company to the US was we would just pull off nights in our Bangalore office and pretend that we are in the US and make calls to our potential customers, just cold calls, and try and learn. And as founders, you have to be very good at hiring. You have to be very good at communicating your vision, communicating or getting somebody else excited about what you're building. Your story around why this is important has to be extremely clear. Anybody who's worth their weight, they'd understand that and they'd want to sit on this rocket ship and they wouldn't ask, what seat do I get?
Immigrating to a new country is difficult. Becoming a founder is difficult. And raising funds as a founder is incredibly difficult. But today, we are discussing not just this, but how do you actually build a business as a founder, as an immigrant, and raise funds, all of that, with Madhulika Mukherjee, who is an entrepreneur from India, moved to the United States to start Delightree. Delightree is a company which helps franchises and businesses in the United States with running their businesses more efficiently, keeping their staff well to date in terms of all the learning materials and everything which comes in the middle of that. I'm incredibly excited to just understand every piece of whatever Madhulika has learned over the years and what all great stuff she can tell us about how do you build it big. So tune in and in the next few minutes, let's hear from her. Madhulika, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shreyas. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. So I did a little introduction, kind of just telling people about how you have tackled incredibly difficult things in terms of like moving from a country, founding a business, raising funds, building a team, all of that great stuff, right? But let's just begin from your journey, right? You grew up in Delhi and then you founded your first business in India. So tell me a little bit about like your entrepreneurial journey, your entrepreneurial spirit. Where did this all begin?
Yeah, sure. It's hard to really point out like where the spirit began because I'm sure it
Yeah.
started somewhere in the childhood. But I remember during like our college time, like I studied in Delhi, and that initial excitement. I think we used to watch the US Shark Tank on like the back seat of our classrooms, and all that excitement around. I think TVF pictures had come out or something like that. So Survaider was truly born in 2016, though our journey really started in 2015 when we were building a slightly different product, right? So that's kind of where it all started. And we started out during college, and then in 2016 we moved the company to Bangalore, and then we spent the next 3-4 years in Bangalore before moving to the US. So that was kind of the inception of it all.
Got it, got it. And you mentioned Survaider. Of course, now
Yeah,
you've got a different company. I'm guessing Delightree is a separate brand, all of that, right? But what
yeah,
was
it is.
Survaider? Can you talk a little bit about that? And why did you begin Survaider?
Yeah, sure. So Survaider was in the customer experience management space. So it was an online reputation management. We were selling to hotel chains, restaurant chains in India, Middle East, and East Africa.
Mhm.
And we had some of the biggest hotel chains and restaurant chains as the customers back then. What we were basically doing for them was that we had this omni-channel kind of system where we would gather feedback that your brand is getting from, let's say, social media. So we would have Twitter, Facebook connectors, Google reviews, your Yelp, Zomato, Swiggy, all of it. There wasn't no Swiggy at that time, but like you get the idea, right? So reviews from all over the place, even like offline collected surveys and things like that. And we would run natural language processing engines on all of this. This was long before OpenAI and all our AI fanciness right now. But we would run NLP engines at that time to then tell you aspects about about your different locations and how your cleanliness or your operations might be happening in those locations, to give you insights that what needs to be really worked on, right? So this was very
Yeah.
helpful for anybody who has like 10 or more locations. This is all for like chain businesses.
Got it. So just kind of put things more into perspective, and again, taking a random example here, right? So say if I'm Domino's or if I'm Pizza Hut, right? I have 10, say, locations in Delhi, India. I would basically be able to use Survaider and figure out what's working, what's not working in a summarized, crisp fashion. And that technology is what you guys were building, correct?
Exactly. It was a platform which would give you like a leaderboard. It would give you
Yeah.
how your different locations are doing on like different aspects. So yes, to
Right.
take your examples, Domino's would know whether my all my locations in the state of Delhi are are complaining about, or are getting lower reviews because of the biggest theme coming out is like, I don't know, smelly restrooms or something like that, right? And then other
Yeah.
locations are doing well because they really like the, I don't know, the sausage pizza or something like that, right? So you would know what's working and what's not working in like this dashboard fashion that we would provide for them.
Got it. Did pineapple pizza ever work?
I love pineapple pizza. Anybody who's against pineapple pizza, no.
Such a hot take.
It is,
Okay,
it is.
so certainly. All right. So moving back to your journey then. So you moved
Yeah.
to Bangalore to basically grow Surveytor after graduating from Delhi. Now here you've spent several years, and I think pandemic kind of came in the middle of the journey as well, right? So what happened exactly there, and what was that inflection point? What was going on?
Yeah, sure. Pandemic didn't come during Surveytor days, right?
Okay.
We were right at the cusp of it, really. Actually, what
Yeah.
happened was that in 2019, we kind of had two choices in front of us, right?
Hmm.
Either we build out Surveytor and hope for like a decent exit in India, right? Or
Mhm.
we quit this and go to US. And I'll tell you why that we even came to that crossroads, right? Because I think with Surveytor, what started happening was we figured that no matter what kind of insights we would give these companies, the dashboards were only discussed in like this with the C-suite and in like boardroom meetings, right? Any real action to be taken from that was not really happening, and there was no way to also close that feedback loop. There was no way to really measure whether the surveyor insights are truly helpful for us or not, right? So it was a very nice, it was a very nice to have kind of a product for them, right? And that was somewhere bothering us because we realized that unless we can close that loop, we can't charge higher for this product, right? It'll
Right.
always be like a nice to have item for these businesses. The other realization that we came to was that even if, let's say, we captured the whole market here, right, in India, in Middle East and Africa, which we wanted to get to, but mostly in India, right, we still wouldn't be $1 billion company. So that was also bothering us because it was very hard to get these businesses to pay for software in a way that we know how they pay for it in the US. So, for example, putting a credit card on file, right, or like we would get our customers to courier checks to us, right, and then we would have to build a team to do all these receivables and track those down, and it was a whole mess, and we knew that no matter what we did, it still wouldn't be a very large company, and that didn't sit right with us. So that was kind of the inflection point where we then came to the crossroads that in 2019 we were like, okay, either we keep our focus here in India and we
Right.
build out Surveytor, we hope for a decent exit, like I said, or
Yeah.
we keep this on pause for a while and figure out, like, take this product to the US
Hmm.
and see if it works there. The really big cost with doing that, and the reason why this is a very hard choice, was because losing focus on Surveytor in India would mean that we would lose the business in India, right? Because
Yeah.
it was still very founder led, still very early. We were 30 or so people in India, I think, at our highest point. Like
Right.
the largest headcount was 30 at some point, but still we couldn't afford to lose focus there. Um, but we still had to make that hard choice, so we did. So we started out with how the journey really started with taking the company to the US was we would just pull off nights in our Bangalore office, and pretend that we are in the US and make calls to
Yeah.
our potential customers, just cold calls, and try and
Yeah.
learn. Obviously, the very first learning you would get is that they are not going to buy this, right? Try and learn why they wouldn't buy this, what's not working out for them, right? And yeah, so we started doing that, and then I think we got really lucky. We got into Alchemist, kind of moved to the US for a few months and started tinkering around with very little money in the bank at the time. I
Yeah.
know at that time, I think this was 2019, middle of 2019, when we went to the US for the first time, and we had a couple of months or maybe a few months of salary in the bank at that time for our
Mm.
Survaider teams, right? And we knew that okay, if we go into this head first, we're going to lose the eye from the ball on Survaider, and we might have to like make a very hard choice between this or that. Um, and it was pretty much like it felt like jumping off the plane and kind of figuring out the parachute along the way, right?
Right.
But yeah, so that's where it all started, and then yeah, and then we went headfirst into our market in the US, and then the rest was
Yeah.
history.
Nice. So much packed in there, right? And I'm gonna throw in a few jargons just to like say get your story right, right?
Feel free.
So yeah. So first thing was essentially you figured out that the total addressable market was not large enough, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's a unicorn level company, even if you get like 100% of the market, was questionable. Then you figured like, okay, maybe we expand into the United States, look outside of the purview of what we're looking at. There is potential there, but then the question you had, or even within your kind of current market segment, was whether you're a vitamin versus a painkiller, which I guess investors like throwing out a lot. Simply means like,
Oh,
is
they
somebody
love
going to
it.
pay for it, right? Right, the vitamin versus painkiller argument always comes. And then the thing
Yeah.
is like, okay, the third one is like, okay, fine, we probably don't have the right product or whatever, but can we at least pretend that we do, and like let's do a pulse or like a litmus test, which is
Yeah.
fake it till you make it sort of a thing. And then that's what kind of gave you could say, some hope and some direction, like, okay, maybe this works, right?
Yes, absolutely. You're so right. We were just a vitamin at that time, right? I would
Yeah.
say a little less than vitamin, if I may say so.
Yeah.
And we wanted to be something that was more crucial to their business. And really, I think
Yeah.
the thought process we had at that time was that we really want to help that business grow. These brick and mortar businesses who've been working or functioning like this since centuries ago, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of innovation has happened in the way they function, really, right? We realized over time that the wedge that we had into the market wasn't right. Not with Surveytor, it wasn't. Um,
Right.
and yeah, we wanted to be a painkiller, and that's kind of
Yeah.
when Delightree was born.
Yeah. And I think the other interesting bit is a lot of people think of like software as a service, or like nowadays, like say AI software service, whatever other jargons might
Yeah.
come in, right? You're like, hey, this is very easy to make. What is your USP or what is your IP and whatnot? But I think to exactly what you said, right? I mean, you want it to be a painkiller. The moment you become a problem solver, it kind of doesn't matter like whether
Yeah.
your technology stack is like replicable or not, right? Because that's no longer your IP then, right? Or it's
Yeah,
not the only
absolutely.
thing in your IP. Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think it's very, I find it a bit overrated to think that your core technology has to be your IP. There needs to be some IP, there needs to be some unique selling proposition, right? But it
Yeah.
need not always be that, oh, it has to be the coolest, best tech out there,
Yeah.
right? I think when we started out in 2014, 15, that was what we believed in as well. And we were just like in our undergrad, we were just completing our engineering,
Yeah.
and it's fair for us to think that way at that time because I think in at least in Indian context and in colleges, I think we really reward people who are doing the more complex things, right? And
Yeah.
that really we carry it with ourselves in our adulthood as well, thinking that, oh, this is not complex, maybe it's not good enough. But what my learning was really over the last few years is that your IP is really the value you're providing to your customers, right? And if that
Yeah.
value is truly valuable,
Yeah.
then they're going to talk about it, and you are inevitably going to grow. If you're providing value, money is going to
Yeah.
follow you after that, right? So our IP really was our relationships that we built, our extremely fantastic team that we have right now. I'm like so super proud of the team right now.
Yeah.
um, yeah, the fact that these folks want to spend time with us, helping build this company, helping build this product, I feel extremely fortunate, and I think that is essentially our IP, that we're able to give value to our customers. Our innovation really in the product is really our business innovation. The fact that we understand
Yeah,
the unique relationship between franchisors and franchisees. And I know we've not come to that yet, but I'll get into that later. But
certainly.
yeah, I think that's our core IP there.
Got it. Okay, so you kind of mentioned that there was a crossroad. Now you figured that, okay, we have to move to the United States. What do you do at that point of time? And you mentioned Alchemist, right? What was going on in your mind? Like, people usually look at, like, okay, I could get into a degree, or like I could get a job and like then migrate and like then do something, right? You kind of chose a completely different path. How did that come around?
Yeah, I think what really worked or was really on our side was our age, really, at that time. We were just
Sure.
um, super young and pumped. Um, I'd say I'm still young and pumped, but at that time, we were, I mean, doing any kind of like higher studies was out of the question because we were already in the motion of like building out a company. We knew that um, what the next 2 to 3 years we wanted to look like, and higher education was not a picture of that, like, was not a part of that picture, right? So what we ended up doing was we applied to Alchemist. We came to the US, and once we were here, we had really underestimated the power of network, the power of tribe, right? And we did see that others around us were slightly ahead of us just because they had spent some time here. They understood how to sell to somebody of a completely different nationality. It was also our first time in the US ever, right? So it was there was quite a learning curve there. We didn't study here, so we didn't have a network of ex college undergrads or whatever post grad
Sure.
folks or friends. We didn't have family here, right? And we really didn't know anybody when we came here, when we landed at this SFO airport. Um, what really helped at that time was spending time with other founders. And I'm sure you've spent some time here. Like, the startup community in SF Bay Area is so supremely helpful and so supremely forthcoming with if you're a newcomer here, like, they'll give you everything you need. And I think what worked for us at that time is that we wore our naivety like a badge of honor, right? Like, we weren't insecure about it. We were just like, hey, we don't know, and that is not our fault, right? And we are here to learn. And really, like, that was our fuel. We just kept talking to more founders. They would connect us to more people who would help us out. So important, like, hires that we made, important customers that we got, all happened because of this constant putting ourselves out there and just trying to make a network. I think we were very lucky that it was all in SF. I don't know if that's the case with the rest of the country as well, but especially here, like, the density of startups here was really helpful for us.
Got it. Um, so you mentioned Alchemist. What is
Yeah.
Alchemist? Is that an accelerator? If so, what does that mean? Yeah,
Oh yeah. Alchemist is a B2B SaaS focused accelerator, right? We've all heard of YC, and YC um, invests in a lot of consumer apps, a lot of B2B as well. Alchemist is just focused on B2B SaaS. So it was really good for us because all their, like, so to speak, training, or at least workshops, were all based on how to sell if you're a B2B SaaS founder, how to create your team, how to get your first customers. So it was all very, very focused. And they just had like 20 companies in the cohort. It was here in San Francisco in the city. And
right.
yeah, we had a ball of a time. It's a 6 month long program. And at the end of it, I think there's a demo day and you get to pitch to investors.
Got it. Got it. The other thing which you were saying while kind of talking about your journey, right? So you mentioned like we just wear naivety as a badge of honor and like walk into conversation saying we don't know, right? Um, that's such a big thing, by the way, which a lot of people just don't do, right? A lot of people feel even when they kind of get into a position of power that I need to have an answer, but just
Yeah.
saying I don't know is way more powerful. And I've seen that with like some senior leadership I worked with at like some of the biggest brands. They do that even
Mhm.
today, and I'm like, oh my god, like how is this person
Yeah.
able to say that I don't know? And it's like probably a board meeting or like under that, right? But yeah, I think coming to that learning at such a young age and like at a position where you were is again incredible. So yeah, kudos.
Yeah, thanks. I do think that that's something I've found and learned from other founders as well. Like, no matter what age they're at, and really even today,
Yeah.
You're always at a position. It's always like being a founder. I think it's a constant hit to your ego because you constantly keep learning how you don't know something, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody to pat your back and say, "Hey, kudos, you do know this. Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations." Right? It's more always like, this is fine, but like the next stage, you don't know what to do there, so get somebody better on your team, right? So yeah, so I think having that is always a really good thing to have in your arsenal.
Yeah. Okay. So now you move to the States, you're in the Bay Area. You go through this 6 month program, kind of like getting more of like learning and testing and all that, right? At what point do you figure that, okay, Survaider is not the thing, we need to have Delightree? And also, if you could tell me about two things, like number one is like, A, the pivot, like what should
Yeah.
be the business. Secondly, also from a perspective of like branding, right? Like, why would you move away from a brand that you've built to kind of creating a new
Hmm.
one?
Yeah. Um, so we came into Alchemist, right? It was a 6 month long thing, and we came in with the idea that we are going to try and sell or make Survaider happen in the US.
Yeah.
What we had like two or three realizations. One of them was that the product itself was not very differentiated enough, and this is a very crowded market. This is like the mecca for SaaS, and something like this, unless it's differentiated from the other products well enough, without a existing network, without existing customers, we will not survive with this product. That was a realization we came to super early, and of course, Alchemist helped a lot with that as well. Um, the second thing I think was that while we were like talking to some early customers, well, they weren't really customers, but like any early adopters who would spend some time with us to give us feedback on the product, what we learned with them was that um, no matter what kind of insights we would give, right, to these C-suites at these customers or organizations that are buying into this product, what would end up happening is that the loop was not getting closed, like I mentioned, right?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be able to measure. And the reason why that was happening, what we learned was that this entire operational workflow was completely broken for them, right? Like there was no way for them to truly communicate down to each location and then further down to the employees of those locations and really get something done because it came like a top-down decision. Everybody's like too lost in their like daily chores, daily like their weekly tasks and everything that getting any organization-wide initiative to happen would take a very long time to get implemented down at every location, simply because a remote, right? So all of this
Yeah.
is being managed remotely, um, and this is not an industry which takes very well to remote working the way tech took to remote working, right? I think we just COVID happened and we just snapped into it, right? But
Yeah.
here it didn't happen that way, right? So they've been remote for the longest time, but everything was still very manual. So the entire feedback loop was not only broken, it was extremely slow.
Mm.
So that was the realization that got us into thinking that what Surveytor does is not really going to help them. We need to take a hard look at how do we truly help these businesses to grow faster. And the
Mm.
only way to do that is to get our hands dirty and understand the operations side of these things, right? Like how are the operations happening, right? Like the fancy tech part of like, oh, AI will tell you this and AI will tell you that was on one side. So we kept that aside
Mm.
and we were like, okay, let's study this first, right? And while doing that, we figured that okay, um, we need to pivot. And what we ended up doing then was that we ended up selling the company that we had in India to our investors in India who had put money in us early on. I think they'd invested in 2017. We sold the company in 2019, 2020-ish. And we started Delightree in 2020 with this in focus that we're going to be helping multi-location businesses fix their operations or be operationally more efficient. Right? That was the initial idea that we started with, which is not what Delightree is really today. We've shifted a little bit from that, but
Sure.
that was the inflection or the pivot point.
Got it. Got it. So, okay. So going back then, you figured that, okay, we have this business which works in India, maybe a little bit in the Middle
Yeah.
East and so on, is not scalable. You move to the States. You then test it with what you'd call as like, say, a research group or like a bunch of like potential buyers or customers. Um, at that level, and this is again like my understanding, the C level or like the highest authority in the executive leadership team would care about the bottom line and top line, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
like, is this going to grow my revenue, or is this going to grow my profit? And your answer is like, hey, well, there's a lot in the middle which we can help with. And they're like, yeah, fine, we care, but not enough, right? And then you're like, okay, fine, how do we influence either the profit or the revenue? And that's what we need to focus on, which is the operational efficiency. So now you're like
Yep.
100% dedicated on that, is it? Yep.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Perfect. Okay. A lot of times I'm also trying to process. I'm like, okay, what exactly things happen, right? Like, so that's probably the thing. Okay. So
Yeah.
then moving to Delightree, right? Like, so you then pivoted completely from Survaider, and then you moved to Delightree. So of course you've sold the business. So now making a net new brand also makes sense. Why is it called Delightree? That's something which I'm also interested in. And yeah, so how do you go about, say, I don't know, here's the hypothesis which you rightly put, but going from that hypothesis to like, okay, this is first deliverable MVP or whatever it is.
Right.
Hmm.
To answer why is it called Lightree,
Yeah.
that's a very tough question because we really don't know. We knew that
Okay.
we wanted to build something. It was going to be B2B. We knew that it's going to help our customers delight their end customers, right?
Yeah.
Because with greater operations comes obviously a better brand, and that could lead to you delighting your customers more, increase your top lines, your revenues, and all of that. Why is it called Delightree? Really, I will need to make up a better answer for that in the
I have
future.
an answer for
But
that if you're interested, ever.
yes, please tell me why should it be called Delightree?
So when I was looking at your business, the way I thought about this is because you are in the franchisee model, right? Like, and again, we'll discuss that in more detail now. It's a tree structure, or it's like a more layer, right? So you're kind of like spreading delight through that chain, and hence it
Yeah,
is called Delight Tree. That was my immediate thought, but I was like, maybe it's just like absurd, and like I'm just
that's
making this up.
it's not absurd. That is actually the most popular guess we've heard. And
Okay,
I think we'll just run with that because I
okay,
think when we interview for like new hires and new people we get onto the
yeah,
team, we ask them as well, why do you think it's called Delightree? And they think we're
yeah.
testing them, but we're really just trying to find out like what's your best guess, please tell us.
So do you think I'll
But
pass?
yeah, you
Will I
you
get a
did
job?
pass.
Okay.
You might just.
Thank you. You might just have a job now. Okay, so yeah.
So yeah, so to answer your question around the hypothesis, right? Like what ended up happening there, and
Hmm,
I guess I'll move that into like what we're really building. Um,
sure.
to understand where we were coming from, right? With Survaider, we were helping out like multi-location businesses, and that's what we thought that okay, it seems like operations is broken. Let's help them make more revenues with this. Um, and we're going to continue to sell into multi-location businesses. Our early adopters were essentially just folks who were um, we built something of a customer advisory board, and what we did was we would get these like COOs and CEOs of like smallish brands, and we would ask them that oh we're building this new product to help you simplify your ops, right? And we're going to give you some shares in the company, um, and yeah, and what we want from you in return is an hour or 2 hours of your time every month, right? And we built like a board of like 10 good brands and like good folks from these 10 brands, and we then had like this whole cohort of people that I could like build the product and go back to and get feedback from, right? So we did this for about 3 to 4 months while at Alchemist when we were building this new product called Delightree, where I would like build the product on Figma, right, which is a design software we all know about, and I would build like the whole prototype and show it to them on calls as if that was the product and get their feedback on that, right? And at that point we still had the Survaider team. They were still working on like maintaining the old product, the Survaider product, and we kind of split our engineering team into two. So we got like 2 or 3 people to help me build out this prototype that I'm building out, right? Like actually build the product behind it. So I was just doing all the design part at that time.
Sure.
So we got these 10 early adopters or customer advisors, right, advisory board folks, to give us early feedback on what's working and what's not working. What we noticed at that time was that this problem is even bigger, not just with like multi-location businesses, but with like franchisee businesses, because they
Yeah.
have a very unique relationship, right? The franchisees don't directly like report, so to speak, to the franchisor. I'm going to say franchisor and franchisee a lot, so I want you to know that franchisor is like the corporate headquarters, HQ level folks, right? The one who started the concept. And
Yeah.
franchisees are the individual locations, right? So Yeah, so the relationship is very unique. They don't report to them. You think of like any franchisee business that you know of, right? Like you think of Domino's, for example, right?
McDonald's,
There
yeah,
is,
McDonald's, yep.
or a McDonald's, yeah. So there is a franchisor who is the, I would say the founder, right?
Yeah,
The founder, their family, whoever owns the business, right?
yeah,
Whoever owns the rights to the name McDonald's, right? And then there's the franchisees who are kind of like their investors or partners, right? These are folks who come in, they want to pay the franchisee fee and they want to get your name, your branding, all of it, and they want to run a McDonald's in their local area, right? So that's the
right.
franchisee, right? Um, so yeah, so this problem around broken operations was even more truer with franchisees and franchisors more than any other corporate owned um, uh, business, right? There's at least they had some control, but in franchisor, you have very little control, right? So we wanted to help franchisors manage that operations end of things, as well as also like launch and open new locations very efficiently, very effectively, right? Um, and right now, if a new franchisee has to kind of buy into your franchisee concept and they want to get a location from you, you have to like jump through so many hoops to get them into the right site, the right, the construction that needs to happen on that site, the branding that needs to be there, the decor that needs to be there. And after all of these permits and legalities are done, then the training that they need to have, the kind of daily ops that they need to have, right? So that end to end, that entire thing was very manual. To understand the hypothesis that we were going after, you have to understand like what was happening right now, right? The training that would typically happen at these franchisee locations was extremely archaic, very, very old. You can imagine like a desktop computer at the back of the location, right? Like a back of the office, and where your employees at the location would have to sit and go through these boring, long, unskippable videos, right, to get trained on the job. Um, to get anything done or get any support from the franchisor, you'd have to wait in like these long queues. Um, as soon as you have like more than 10, 12 franchisees, the franchisor kind of loses their oversight as well, and they're not able to properly support these locations, right? So you would have long queues from the franchisee perspective. You would have long queues to get anything done, get any support. Everything would be lost in these Google Drive, email trails, and paper trails, right? So it would really lead to very low engagement, very low morale from like the franchisee side, especially because there was um, no way for them to really see the bigger picture, and they were all just lost in like, okay, this is what I need to do on a day-to-day basis, and that wasn't helping the brand overall. I think the most successful franchisee brands, they're able to inculcate that brand vision in each and every franchisee as well, which is why you see that all McDonald's kind of behave in the same way, right? They have the same way of greeting their customers. They have the same way or standard operating procedures around what to do when something wrong happens, right? It's extremely crystal clear and it's written down in stone, right? So in order to become that successful franchisee brand, what does it take, right? So the hypothesis we had was that you need to treat your franchisees and your franchisee employees like the smart, capable humans that they are, which means that you have to raise your standards with which you provide support to your franchisee locations if you ever dream of becoming a McDonald's, right? If you want to be that, then you have to raise your standards. And what does raising standards really look like here? It's in the engaging training and content that you give to your franchisees, right? It's in the easy workflows that you make sure that mesh with their daily lives and their daily workflows as well, so that they're truly able to run the location in the way that you had expected them to run that location, right? And if you look at um, Netflix, like they fundamentally changed how people consume television, how they consume entertainment, right? If you look at Apple with iPhone, I think they fundamentally changed how smartphones and phones were to come ever since after that for decades to come, right? So we were building what we thought was the Apple to franchisee tech, right? We were building that raised experience, that high bar, that standard with which you will run your franchisee locations, with which you will provide support to your franchisee locations, and with which you will be able to essentially run all operations at your locations. And yeah, so that's essentially what the hypothesis was, and how we ended up validating that hypothesis really was, I think we ended up getting unlike any other product in this space, we ended up getting extremely high engagement numbers, which is something that a lot of products and a lot of franchisors as well struggle with. We got very high engagement numbers from franchisee locations as well as their employees as down at the location as well, on the product. So they are all running like clockwork on Delightree because it's easy to use. It meshes well with their daily lives, like I said, and yeah, you have everything you need on this one app or this one platform, and you don't have to go to email, Drive, and multiple other places to get your stuff done.
Got it. So going back to the previous thing which you're saying about being the painkiller here, right? How
Yeah,
did you figure out that, okay, what we're building now? And again, you mentioned that there is engagement, right?
yeah.
Which previously was an issue. But then what does that translate into, okay, fine, we've got product market fit and this is now a painkiller, right? What was that moment like? And I know it's not like, okay, today, 12 p.m., it looks like that. But yeah, what exactly was that journey? And like, when did you feel that this is time?
Yeah, it came a bit gradually. I think how we definitely knew, so there's two questions there really, right? How do
Yeah,
we know that it's a painkiller, and how do we know we have product market fit,
product
right?
market fit, correct.
How we knew it was a painkiller was that when we would like demo this product to our very initial customers, like 2021, right? They would go wow at it, right? Like they were like, okay, we need this. And we realized the hard way that free trials don't work here really well, right? If something's for free, people are not going to use it.
Hmm.
So it came as a surprise to us, but it was also a very pleasant surprise that we could just start
Yeah.
charging for what was a very a pre-revenue company. We could start charging for what was a very like a very initial version of the product, right? Wherein we came from the mindset that, oh, the product has to be perfect, it has to be great before it goes out. I think over time we learned that you just ship it, whatever you have, just ship it, get your early customers to use it, and get feedback and learn and run with it, right? So how we knew it was a painkiller was that those early customers were um, they were coming back to us with more improvements and like requests that they wanted on the same product, and they had all our customers were using it for all the same reasons. I think that was a very big unlock that we had, right? With our previous iterations and things in Delightree, when we started in 2020, I think for 2 years we had like
Yeah.
multiple different iterations we worked on, which I could go into. But what we ended up with in 2022 was this product wherein um, our all our early customers were using the product for exactly the same reasons, right? They were the kind of feedback or the feature requests that were coming in, kind of improvements that they wanted, were all falling in line with the product vision that we had. So there wasn't a lot of like herding the sheep here from here and there, key, like just stay in line. We won't do that. We won't do that. It's not in our vision. People are using it
Yeah.
for all different reasons. That was not happening anymore. So that's also where we knew that we're getting kind of like a product market fit because the product was working really well for this market, albeit very early users, very few in number,
Sure.
but it was definitely working out for them, right? And now the signals that we get from the market are that, hey, we're getting actually a lot more attention than we can handle. We I could go into like GTM and everything later, but definitely like whichever channels we try out, we get a lot more pull from the market than earlier when we had to push the product a lot, right? Our pedagogy of how training and how operations at franchisees is slightly different from how other products in this area think about. But what is clear to us now is that our early customers, and at least the customers that they bring to us through referrals, they talk about us a lot. Um, they all kind of buy into that pedagogy as well. So that's how we knew that we had a painkiller on our hands and that we had some product market fit.
Amazing. Okay, so one of the things about like your story in general, right, is a lot of like firsts, right? Like getting a first client, starting a first business, raising for the first time, hiring the first time, all of that stuff, right? Do you want to like break that down for me a little bit, like as a first time founder, right, or as a first time immigrant founder and all of that stuff? How do you go after, and you mentioned of course that you built that advisory board where an alchemist help, but how do you like close your first sale?
Yeah, that was very hard for us, right? As you rightly put, as a first time immigrant founder, it was difficult for us because we didn't have a network here. We didn't speak the right language. And by
Yep.
language, I don't mean actual language. Like we didn't speak the right startup speak um, that works for Americans, right? We all our understanding of like how to sell, how to have a company in the United States was all based on everything we'd learned from Twitter, everything we'd learned from like watching shows, watching Shark Tank, the US Shark Tank, back in the early 2010s or so. So when we did land up here, it was hard for us because obviously real life is different from TV, and
Yep.
we learned it the hard way. So what we ended up doing, I think in the beginning, was we made a mistake. We thought that the way to sell would be the typical Silicon Valley SaaS sales playbook, right? And that didn't work for us. So what we ended up doing was we moved to Texas
Hmm.
from Bay Area, right? We knew that in Texas and Florida, really, we just wanted proximity, right? We knew that
Yep.
a lot of big brands, a lot of big franchisors are born out of Texas, out of Florida, and these states, right? And in order to really learn from them, we need to be closer to them. So that's what we did. We moved here to Texas, and we just put ourselves out there in terms of heading out to these trade shows. We really just saw, okay, where are our customers spending the most time?
Yep.
Let's just absorb all of that, right? Let's just absorb and learn by osmosis. So we would land up at these trade shows and expos, and these events that franchisors would flock to, and we'd learn a great deal from that. We would put up like a small booth, learn from them. We wouldn't make any sales there, but we'd learn how they're talking, what's going on, what are some main problems that they're facing, right? I think how we closed our very first sale was through one of our channel partners that we ended up making. His name is Nick, and my co-founder Tushar kind of got in touch with him. This was like through cold outreach on LinkedIn, and kind of preparing ourselves with, hey, Nick has written this book, and and this is where he speaks at, and just keeping ourselves educated with what's happening. And we talked to him about what we're building. I think he gave us like that first round of validation, which was very helpful. That he was like, this product is great, because he was the kind of person who was helping franchisors build out their franchisee empires, right? So he was kind of like he had a company which was doing consultancy for franchisors, and he gave us that validation that what I'm doing manually right now, like this product would be really helpful for my customers. So let me put you in front of them, right? So through that, we got in touch with a lot of real franchisors, and we got them to see our product. And in the beginning, we would like take any and every feature request that they would have, and we would like bend over backwards to make it work for them. And that was really how we closed our first sale. Like I think the first 3 months with no payment, we would obviously with a written agreement that they would pay us in the future. We just like built everything that they needed to make sure that their operations are the way that they wanted it to happen. And these franchisors were those who were had dreams of like becoming 1,000 location franchisor at some point, and they had maybe 10 to 12 locations today, but they had already signed into 150 locations. So they were growing fast, so their needs were right in up our alley. Like that's exactly the kind of franchisors we wanted to build for. So we got really good partners through that channel. And that's really how we closed our first sale, which was, I think, somewhere in 2022. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, of course, that's a first client, and I think what I love about that story is the conviction, which I think is inherent to a founder profile, right? Like you have to be extremely in love with like, okay, here's the problem which I've identified, and like I'm just gonna like go full on into it, right? How did that conviction, like, say, translate into also the first hire? Because I always
Hmm.
find that hard, and especially in your case, you end up in a new location, all of that, and like you don't have a network, and hiring for a startup is incredibly hard because you often cannot match, say, for a good employee, you cannot match what they might get at a different organization, right, in terms of compensation and all of that. How did you tackle that, and like how did you convince somebody like, okay, you need to be a part of the Delightree family, here's why?
Yeah. That's a great question, and that was, I think, our biggest struggle. Everything else pales in comparison to getting your first few important hires. We did have some hires in the very beginning of our journey in the US, which didn't work out for us that well for multiple reasons from their side as well as from our side, right? And I wouldn't say just getting hires is hard because I mean if you have money to offer, there will be people who are there to take it, right? There's always someone or the other in some condition who wants that, okay, even if it's lesser money, I'll get it, right? So that wasn't hard. What was difficult was um really asking ourselves like is this is working if this is working out, if this team is working out. And at some point we realized that no, it wasn't. And this was in early 2022 when we figured that we were like still dabbling with different iterations of what Delightree would become. And the product that we had, at least at the very end of that period, was not working out because we were getting pulled in all kinds of different directions. The team we had was also super distracted, all because of us, that like we were pulling them in different directions and it simply wasn't working, right? So after that, I think we realized that the very first or good hire that we would need is somebody who understands this market really, really well. We understand our consumers and what they need, or our customers really well, but really understand the market overall. We needed somebody who had some inroads in this, right? And that's when we ended up getting our first head of sales. So that was really our first most important hire that we made. And to answer your question around how do you convince them to stay, right? Like
Yeah.
you I think the best person to ask this question would be really them, the folks on our team, and why they chose to join. But you're absolutely right. You can't match what's the base rate or salaries out there in the market that they're probably getting from other folks. A lot of the people that did end up joining Delightree in those early days were, and even for Survaider as well, right? They joined at a pay cut. They joined at lesser salary than they would get somewhere else, and we're very grateful for them that they did that, and very 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 glad that it worked out. Um, but I think the biggest reason was that they saw potential in this product. They saw potential in our vision. And as founders, I think that's something that is very important. You have to be very good at hiring. You have to be very good at communicating your vision, communicating or getting somebody else excited about what you're building. Um, your story around why this is important has to be extremely clear, right? It has to be very clear as to why this is a painkiller. And anybody who's worth their weight, they'd understand that and they'd want to sit on this rocket ship and they wouldn't ask what seat do I get, right? You ask somebody
Yeah.
gets you to sit on the rocket ship, you just go with it, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so those were some of our learnings with I think our very early hires. But over time, like we had a lot of different learnings with all the other hires that we made along the years. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, I think the one more thing which I want to touch on that is culture, right?
Yeah.
Because hey, I have a role for you. I have probably a compensation range which works for you. But then here's the culture that you walk into, and I'm defining that now, right? Or all of us are defining that, but this is what it needs to be, right? What are
Yes.
some of your learnings from there, and like you could say what are some salient features that you paid particular attention, like okay, this needs to be a part of culture or this needs to be not a part of our culture?
Yeah. That's something that I think Tushar and I were very clear with from the very beginning. I'm talking like 9 years ago, like when we were just out of college. Like we knew what the culture of our company should be like. Culture, to begin with, is a very intangible thing, right? So what usually ends up happening, at least in the early stages when you're like 50, 100, 150 employees, right? In your team, the culture is really the personalities and the mind space of the founders, right? How cluttered or how organized a founder is typically something that's going to translate into the rest of the company, right? Um, and we knew that anybody who's going to be a part of our team is going to have to be somebody who is very clear with one or two things. One is you have to leave your ego at the door, right? You can't walk into a company that's this early and have ego around, oh, this is my job description, this is the people who report to me, this is the way you need to talk to me, or whatever other notions people come with from larger companies, right? Like you can't come with that when you walk into a startup office, right? That was one. The second was you have to be very comfortable with wearing like multiple hats. Like you can't be somebody that I don't do this or I don't know how to do that, so I'm just not going to do it. That's simply not going to cut it. Right? When you are very few people, everybody kind of does multiple things. Everybody really does everything, right? And we knew that it's going to have to be somebody who we can have a meal with or a drink with or just coffee with after work. And it's just going to be somebody that we're able to talk to even outside of work. And if all of these things are true, then the culture will kind of take care of itself, right? Then you don't have to like sit down, write values and your culture on like a presentation, which by the way that was something we did in 2016 because we learned that Netflix used to do that, so we were like, oh, we need to do that. But over time we learned that no, culture is really just something that it's in the air. It's something that it's in the little decisions you make on a day-to-day basis, right? If someone's late to work, right, how do you treat them? If someone um, I don't know, stole something, right? How do you treat them? If someone um, is not performing really well consistently for 3 months, right? What do you do with those employees, right? Or those team members? That is what speaks of your culture. It's the decisions you take, right? So that was something we were very clear with from the very beginning as to how our culture should be. It should be that of transparency, honesty, and everyone has to understand that speed is of utmost importance. You have to be very fast with what you're building. You have to be very fast with iterating. You first um, you don't try and get everyone's permission and try to get everybody aligned on an initiative you want to take that you think will help Delightree. Just go and do it. Prove in a very small set that it works. Then come back to the founder, say that hey, this works, and I'm going to go for it. And you have all the rights to go for it and kind of build that out for yourself. So yeah, transparency, speed, honesty. Just leave your ego at the door and behave like a founder.
Right. Nice. What I love about what you just said is like, even when, of course, that whole exercise of like, okay, here are the 10 values of the company is probably not as much required. But then the nature of your business, because of that multi, I don't know, channel of like, okay, here's a franchisor and then there's a franchisee and there are million locations and whatnot, your value system really runs like blood in the veins, right? So I mean, even when
Yeah.
you don't write it down, I think the execution of your product is an embodiment of like what values you are building even within the company. So you guys are like living it day in day out. So writing it down just doesn't make a difference all that much at one point. That's what I think.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't because we did do that, right? And it didn't make as much of a
Yeah.
difference no matter how many times you repeat it. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean anything unless it translates into your daily actions, like how you run meetings, how you let people collaborate on those meetings. What happens after the meetings? Do you follow up? Is there a follow-up culture, right? Do you have to like keep poking everybody to make sure that, hey, did you take that down? Or do they come back to you on their own? All of that is culture, right? And you
Yeah.
have to just lead by example. If you do that as founders, then everybody else will follow suit.
Amazing. Okay, so then speaking about the mindset and the growth, right? And I want to couple this together very quickly. So you're of course like one of the founders and companies which have gone from like 0 to 1, and I would say 1 to a growth stage or like 100 or whatever, right? In terms of mindset, what your priority has been and what is the measure of success, right? Those three things. How have you seen it in those say 2 or 3 phases, like 0 to 1, 1 to 100 primarily?
Yeah. I'd say 0 to 1 was one stage, and now we're at 1 to 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
1 to 100 we'd probably get into after this stage, but definitely right now we're in that 1 to 10 stage, which is super exciting. When it was 0 to 1, I wish I could tell you what the mindset was because it was complete chaos at that time. But mindset was really like just do whatever it takes to get it off the ground, right? There were like no priorities. Everything was priority, right? Every
Yeah.
day was a war between surviving or shutting down, right? So that 0 to 1 stage is in a way also very exciting, especially for folks who like that kind of chaos, which was us, because we loved the fact that we could keep building this product, and we were builders, right? We used to love to like design and like really put our thought into every experience, the UX of it all, right? And then also talk to some early customers, get their feedback. It's constant adrenaline, right? You're constantly on an adrenaline search, right? And you're doing whatever it takes. And every day you wake up thinking that, okay, is this the last day, right? And then you just survive to have one more day. But that was 0 to 1, right? And um, anybody who's gone through that stage, I think, will agree. It's quite hard, but at the same time, it's also exciting for all the wrong reasons, right? But when you get to that 1 to 10 stage, which is I think where we are at right now, um, I think it's too early to say it's not chaotic. But the good news is that I think there are a lot of very streamlined directions and opportunities in front of us, and really, it's all about what we want to do and what we want to choose, right? There are opportunities and directions that are led by multiple stakeholders. So there's the team that wants to do something. There's competition, right? There's the insecurity that, oh, competition has this features, or they're building this other product line, or they are, targeting that market. We also need to go after that, right? Like, why aren't we doing that stuff? Why aren't we building that, right? So there's competition that's directing a lot of your roadmap. Then there's customers who are obviously they're giving feedback, they're directing your roadmap as well, and you always listen to customers. And there are investors. We do have investors here now. We have institutional investors would like to have who would like to see some things happen on the product or on the customer front or something or the other, right? So there's lots of opportunities out there, right? And as founders, I think it is our responsibility to identify the biggest bets that we can make, right? Um, and really, the F word we like to throw around here is focus. What are you focusing
Yeah.
on? Are you saying no to 9 things today in order to do that one thing? If you woke up today and you just had two choices and you did one of those two choices, no rewards for that, right? Like, there's no big deal choosing one out of two, right? You need to have at least 10 things you said no to, and then you chose to do that one thing. That has to be the supremely important thing that you do for that day, because there are going to be so many other things that's going to take you down a path that might not be that rewarding. So every day it's about like prioritizing what is going to give you the most returns, right? And as founders, we try and inculcate that culture into everybody else who works with us as well. That's, I would say, kind of like the mindset of our last few months and how it's been. But I think one thing that hasn't changed from like 0 to 1 and now 1 to 10, I'm sure it will not change from like 10 to 100 either. I don't remember if I read this in Ben Horowitz's book or if I saw this on Twitter somewhere. But if your role as founders, if it hasn't changed, if you don't look back every 6 months and you see that it hasn't changed, and what you're doing on a daily basis is still the same as it was 6 months ago, then something is amiss. Either you're not growing, or you're not focusing on anything important. Because if nothing you're doing is changing, then that means that in the last 6 months you haven't prioritized the most important thing, and you haven't seen any results come out of it, and which is why your day to day did not change because of it. So every 6 months you would be looking back, and your day should look completely different from what it used to look like 6 months ago. So I would say that is something that has remained constant. But yeah, 0 to 1 was super chaotic, and 1 to 10 is chaotic as well. But at least it's streamlined. We've got teams to kind of to bring out those opportunities in different directions.
Got it. And so, I mean, one thing which I love when I'm talking to founders is they're all visionary people, right? Like they know, and you said like you need to know where to bet, right? Next. What does the next 12-month bet look like for you? Again, at a super high level, like
Hmm.
this is the area of focus. This is where I want to put all my energy.
Yeah. In the next 12 months, where we want to be, and to say that, to begin with that, I would like to first tell you about like the vision that we have for Delightree, right? Like, we
Yeah.
are right now in the franchisee tech space. We are the wedge that we went into this market was, we want to help solve operations for franchisors. We want to help them build a world-class brand by helping them give them a platform that helps them standardize their standard operating procedures, their tasks, daily chores, their audits, inspections, all kinds of permits. They're able to provide chat support to their franchisees as well. So all of that kind of happens on one single platform, so that you don't have to go to different point solutions that are right now out there in the market that a lot of our customers used to use. But we replaced all of that, consolidated their efforts, and now they have like this one platform where they're able to do all of this, right? So we started out with franchisee operations, but really where we want to be is that we want to be that end-to-end franchisee technological partner, right? We want to be starting out with helping them find more franchisees or find more locations. So the CRM sales side of it, to helping them get their insurance, find a site, find the right kind of franchisee consultants to help set everything up, to this operations piece that we've already built out, to then even the technology stack at the location itself, which is helping them, do attendance management, um, their again their daily tasks, their shift management, inventory, all of that good stuff down at the location as well. Um, and all of this wrapped up into like overall big picture um, financial reporting for all of this, right? So where are your top lines? Where are you losing money? Where are you bleeding? How much are you spending on labor versus how much are you spending on, sending this raw material to every location? All of that, the financial reporting side of it would kind of encapsulate all of this overall, right? So that's the overall vision. We want to be what kind of HubSpot is to startups, right? Like when
Yeah.
you have to start a startup, almost everything you need to do, you go to HubSpot for, or at least they're becoming like that omnipresent technology partner for us for startups. And they also started out with just the CRM piece, and now they have customer success, they have marketing, they have all these other product lines, right? So that's how we want to grow like that as well for franchisees that are in any kind of vertical. Our customers today start from like car washes to gyms to spas and salons and restaurants and all kinds of verticals, right? So we want to be that technology partner for all of them. So having said that, what the next 12 months now look like for us is really just executing on that vision, um, by um, moving into those other product lines to make sure that we capture our users' daily habits and help them. Um, Really, we capture our users' daily habits by making sure that they are using Delightree for starting out with their operations to their end franchisee stack as well, which means shift management, coming into their locations, looking at Delightree to see, okay, these are my daily tasks. This is the training that's overdue. Oh, this was the training from 6 months ago that I was supposed to have been done with, and this is the inspection that's coming up next month, and this is how we want to prepare for it, right? So all of that end to end, just executing on that vision is really what we want to do in the next 12 months. Couple of interesting projects that we're working on. One is we're building out this um, AI conversational SOPs, we want to call it. We don't have a name for it yet because we're still in beta with it, but conversational SOPs where your franchisee locations can just chat into the Delightree app with voice and say that, hey, I need help with this customer who's just walked into my restaurant, he's drunk and I don't know what to do with him. Like, he seems to be a cop as well. Like, what's the policy around that? And
Yeah.
the Delightree app would tell you, it would sift through, we'd use LLMs and it would sift through all of the policies and everything that are already uploaded onto the Delightree app by your franchisor, and it would give you the exact SOP that you need to follow in that moment. So that's an interesting project that we're working on.
Nice. Maybe you should call it Woodpecker. Makes the hole and like figures out.
Yeah, that's a nice
Just
nice name. I
yeah.
should get you on board for our like all our naming related
Yeah,
issues.
totally. And I could do a complete reverse engineering of like, okay, this is why we named it this way, even if you like don't have a
Oh
thesis around
yeah,
it.
we do have some names that we have no rhyme or
Yeah,
reason for. I think I need you for
yeah.
that.
Love it. Okay, so one last question from you, Madhulika. The bunch of people who are aspiring, budding entrepreneurs, or like just builders and stuff, right? You've had an incredible journey, decade long, of like struggle and at the same time a lot of glory and like actually providing value. What is, say, your advice to these people who are just starting out or like very much in the journey?
Yeah. See, if you're starting out, then the one thing I think I'd have told myself from 9 years ago, or I would tell anyone who wants to listen, is that idea does not mean jack shit. Like, idea is not worth anything. It's execution that's everything. People, I think, focus too much on the fact that the idea itself has to be very unique. It has to be a game changer. It has to be like a product that from the very get-go kind of wows everybody. It's really how you execute it is what means everything. Idea is only going to take you maybe 10% of the way, right? So yeah, I think focusing on execution is very, very important. And and I think the kind of personalities that do really well with entrepreneurship is those who are very comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Like, they don't lose their cool when they're uncomfortable, or they don't like have a breakdown just because things got super uncomfortable, somebody questioned them on stage about something else, or some team member told them that they're better than them at doing something, right? These are all like you're going to face uncomfortable scenarios almost on a daily basis. And if you're the kind of person who has very less ego, very eager to learn, and very comfortable with, and almost in a way that you invite discomfort into your life, right? I think that kind of attitude is going to take you very far. So definitely becoming okay with that is very important. The one thing that I have a younger sister who's also really into all of this, and she loves to talk about entrepreneurship and things like that. So I keep telling her as well about how um, adaptability is super important, right? Like I think for any startups that you see that did anything, right? Like the ones that are doing really well today or are worth anything in the world right now, um, it's Darwin's principle, right? It's survival of the fittest. So if you're able to adapt to your changing environment, if you're able to evolve constantly, you're gonna do just fine. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is like just keep the lights on, like that's it. Just keep the lights on and just survive one more day. And if you keep surviving like that, and if you keep your team morale high, and if you keep making sure that you're executing on your vision and you're just adapting, right? It does not mean that you have to take some really crazy decision every single day. I think that's what movies and TV shows kind of ruin us with. They make us think that if you make that one crazy decision, it's going to change the course of your life. It typically doesn't happen like that. It's usually always really small, insignificant decisions getting compounded on a day-to-day basis that account for very big, significant changes in your company or in the course of your product, right? So you have to be very okay with like that delayed gratification, right? Just adapt, do small things, but do the right thing every day, right? As a founder, your responsibility is to just make sure that your team is super focused, and it's really a responsibility to make sure that they get a lot of shots, right? Which means that a lot of shots at trying something out. The way to get them a lot of shots is to either you fundraise, you buy yourself that kind of time so that your team can make that many shots, or you just let go of the notion that luck needs to happen to you somehow. I'm a big proponent of someone who believes that there is no luck, or there's very little luck involved in most things. I think people who look at, oh, this founder, like he did so and so because they got lucky and something happened overnight. It's typically not so. It's because they kept making those many shots enough number of times so that one of those shots worked, and then the world just thought that, oh, that was just luck. So you just make sure that your team gets those many shots at hitting the problem, the customer, the market, right? And yeah, I think that would be it. Just ask yourself every day if what you're doing is the right thing to do. Some things are going to be the easy thing to do, but some things are really hard, and usually anything hard that you want to get to is after it comes after like some sucky period, right? So just embrace the suck is what I have read around a
Yeah.
lot, which is that good thing that you want to get to is either after 100 bad workout sessions, it's either after 100 bland meals, 100 hours of deep work. I think I was reading this somewhere on Twitter yesterday, that if you embrace the suck, then, and if you're somebody who invites that into your life, that okay, what's the next hard thing to do? Then you're going to do just fine. So that would be my very long drawn advice to aspiring entrepreneurs.
That's extremely inspiring. But and on the whole, there's just so much of like learnings packed into all the conversation we've had in like the last hour or so. Madhulika, this was amazing. I absolutely loved every minute of this. Thank you so much for like coming on the show.
Yeah, likewise. I loved talking to you, and I think we should keep continuing doing this. Like as and when we have more learnings, I'd love to come back and share more.
Please, please, by all means. All right. So thank you again, Madhulika. For all the listeners out there, this was Madhulika Mukherjee from Delightree. She's a co-founder of Delightree and has been doing a stupendous job at building a B2B SaaS for helping franchisees and franchisors in the United States. So stay tuned as we get you more content around how do you build it big. Till then, please like, share, subscribe. You know the drill.